Welcome to PHP UK, new venue, same faces, I love to see it. I'm Gary. If you haven't met me, I'm a consultant at Rove. We specialize in helping you to be able to ship code when you've got to that position where maybe every time you deploy something breaks, you're playing bug whack-a-mole, all those other good things. So that's what I do. That's my kind of speciality. And there's kind of an old, it's not a joke, there's a statement, right, which says if you ask a junior developer what we should do in our project, they'll give you an answer. If you ask a more senior developer, they'll reply with, it depends, right? It depends. It depends on this, depends on that. There's very few yes or no answers when it comes to making our decisions in our daily job in tech. And I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about some of the decisions. Maybe some of us or all of us in this room are guilty of maybe not thinking about as much as we should day to day. So that's kind of the premise of this talk. These are all my opinions. They'll all be right, but they're all my opinions. Yeah, it's kind of like old man yells at cloud the talk is kind of what this is, right? So it is what it is. You may have noticed that I am kind of aggressively Welsh, which is fine. I'm speaking nice and slowly. I'm hoping you can understand me. I get kind of excited during the talk and I may start speaking a little quicker and you may just hear noise. So make sure that you tell me if that happens and I'll kind of reset and slow down. Because yeah, it's going to be a long talk if you can't understand the word I'm saying. So yeah, kind of what are we actually talking about here? I guess we're talking about the compromises that we make day to day when we are working in tech. Yeah, I didn't generate any of the AI images here, but I did find AI generated images that made me laugh and put them in. So it is what it is. We're always making compromises with the decisions we make every single day of our working life. It's like there are no yes or no. It's always shades of grey. Not that shades of grey. They're always shades of grey in everything we do. And I kind of try and think of the decisions that I'm making day to day as a consultant as like, maybe like a slider. So there's always something you're giving up in order to gain something else in everything that we do. Very few decisions we make have no downside at all. And sometimes the slider's all the way to one side and there's lots of upside and very little downside. And those decisions are then really straightforward to make. And sometimes the slider's more in the middle and there is downside, but we're willing to mitigate that because we're making the benefit. And sometimes the slider's like this and we don't even realize it. Sometimes we're making decisions based on historically having always done it this way. We're not accepting the risk that we are giving to our project and to ourselves in order to gain the reward. And I think that's where the danger lies. And we're going to talk about some of those right now today. Just a reminder, these are my opinions. Like, you can shout at me all you want if you think I'm super far away, but they're my opinions, so, you know, it is what it is. Old man yells at cloud the talk. It is interactive. You can vote during the talk as we go. So I didn't have a slide. I wasn't even sensible enough to put a slide with the Wi-Fi at the end. But what I did do was take a photo so that I can read it out to you. So the network is America Square Conference, and the password is AMSQ12345. Capital letters, yes. So this is just something that I knocked up for this talk. You will be able to vote multiple times if you're clever enough. Everyone in this room will be clever enough. I'm trusting you not to like DDoS me when I'm live on stage giving a keynote. Probably not the most sensible thing to do in a room full of nerds to say, please don't try and break my app. But, you know, I'm hopeful. Thank you. So yeah, let's get started. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is a trend that I'm riding about 5 years behind the curve on. But when should we use a single monolith application and when should we split things out into smaller services? And the answer is, in case you hadn't realized, it depends. It's kind of the trick. So we've got our voting app, which appears to be working, which is number one bonus for today. It's not working. Well, 26, 30, it's updating. It's all good. It's all good. So what we're asking here is, would you rather work on a monolith or would you rather work on microservices? Now, I am conscious of the fact that not 5 minutes ago I said, there are no yes and no answers, there are no A and B answers, it's all shades of grey. But I couldn't work out how to do this in a way where you could move the slider in time to get here for the conference, so we're going to have A, B answers for the sake of this. Maybe next time I'll do a better job. So yeah, we're talking about a monolith. It's a single repository application, let's say, where we're just working on one code base, typically with one database. Sometimes you look horrified, Derek. What, you don't like? It's fine. We're good. We're all good. It's fine. Yeah, we're talking about a single repository, typically with a single database, everything going through a router to be dispatched, typically MVC. It doesn't have to be, a Laravel app, a Symfony app, a typical monolith. Massive upsides to using a monolith, typically because all your code is in one place. Everybody gets to learn about all of the domain, which is the important thing rather than the code, I feel. I think there's huge benefits. With regards to microservices or services, the times that I think that you should start to look at implementing microservices are if you're Netflix or if you're having problems deploying, because if you're having problems where you need to bring the entire system down to deploy and one parcel of your code base is causing you to have to bring down the entire site. So maybe you're working on a stock feature that needs rapid deployments, and that's bringing down your entire system every single time you have to deploy. Maybe it's worth pulling out just the stock system into its own service. If you're a purist, typically they say that you should have a team who only work on one service. So if you've got a team who are working on multiple services, that might be a red flag that maybe you don't need microservices. Microservices should have their own state, so you shouldn't share a database between microservices. If you're doing that, that could be a red flag to say, oh, maybe we don't kind of need those yet. But they're powerful things. I just think that, particularly, I'm probably in the wrong room to be preaching this, because we're all working in PHP, we're all working in an environment where we request response, and typically most of us will be working on a single monolith application. Is there anyone who's not working on a single monolith application in the room? Yeah, there's a few. I think there's probably, I'm going to guess maybe that isn't a PHP application. Is that a fair summary? Yeah. So yeah, typically in PHP we always do this. So it's a nice easy one to start with. I do think that there was a big fad a few years ago. We have to be microservices. And monoliths are great. They do the 90% job incredibly well, and then there's maybe 10% of the times you need to pull things out. So I can see the 70% of the people in the audience agree with me. You're all right, well done. 29 people are wrong, it's fine. So let's move on, kind of hand in hand with monoliths. Like, when should I use an opinionated framework and when should I roll my own? It depends, yes, well done. It depends, right? But again, this kind of comes down to, there's our vote starting, people are voting, thank you very much. It depends, right? It comes down to what you're trying to achieve. And I think that, I just like this stupid graphic I found. I don't really have anything to say on that. But there's a lot of pros to opinionated frameworks, right? There's a lot of upside. You don't have to think about kind of the unimportant technical decisions that you're making day to day. You don't have to think, where should my files live? The boring stuff that realistically is unimportant. You should be spending your thinking energy on fixing the tickets that you have and fixing the domain problems that you have for your application. You shouldn't be wasting your energies thinking, what code style should I use? Where should my files live? All this stuff is largely unimportant. With the opinionated frameworks, I like to think that somebody who is smarter than me or more experienced than me has made the decision for me, and I can just roll with it. I like to think that. I don't know if it's true, but it is what it is. And of course, if you're working on a Laravel app and you do it the Laravel way, then hiring somebody who knows the Laravel way, they should be able to drop straight into a project. Or if you move to a different team, you should just be able to start working on that project really quickly, because there's norms that you know where the code should be living, you know where to find everything. It should be much more of a smoother transition to bring someone onto the team, or to move on to another team yourself. Of course, there are cons, like you may not like the decisions that somebody's made. You may find yourself writing code in a way that maybe you're not particularly keen with. So the danger here, I think, is that when people turn to an opinionated framework without really thinking about what that framework is bringing them and the pros and cons. So typically like Laravel new, or if you're like me and you don't want to install a piece of software just to mask one composer command, composer, create project, Laravel. But of course there's Symfony new. Symfony's become more and more opinionated over the years. It started off relatively unopinionated in my humble opinion, and it's become more and more opinionated. And I think a lot of us are guilty of turning to Laravel new immediately without really even thinking about the tech stack that we need to solve a problem. And that's fine. We've already talked about the pros and cons. It's just maybe taking the time to actually think about what the cons are before just turning to your favorite tool over and over again. There may be value in that for you. There may not be, but that's fine. Like, I'm not a particular fan of Laravel's facade pattern. It's not for me. I think that's kind of a trade-off. It's completely and utterly feasible to use Laravel without using facades, but then you're trading away one of the great benefits of using an opinionated framework like Laravel. If you elect to do it your own way, you may as well be rolling your own and doing everything your own way if you're not going to unleash the underlying power of the framework. To be consistent, I'm not a massive fan of Symfony's attributes approach that's become more and more popular. I'm not a big fan of that either. I feel like it kind of masks configuration and you can't see configuration all in one place. I know there are command line commands to do that, but it's not for me. I just wanted to prove I'm not picking on Laravel. I also don't like some parts of Symfony. It's all good. So yeah, I think that, again, just to reiterate, I think that we're just guilty of maybe turning to Laravel new or Symfony new without really giving the consideration. Could I do this with Slim, which is just a router? I'm bringing a couple of libraries and make everything more lightweight. I come from a generation where we were always taught not to ship code to production that you don't need. It's, I guess, a security vulnerability, but is it really now? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know. Like, if you've got code that's not being executed on your server, is that a bad thing? I don't know. It feels like it is. It depends. Thank you, Kat. Yeah. And of course, times are different. Like, space was a premium. I remember in my shared hosting days where maybe I wouldn't have wanted a full framework because I couldn't afford the storage space to run that. But those kind of problems have definitely moved on. So 78% of people would prefer to use an opinionated framework. I guess I would have thought that would have been further up here, but you know, this is a learning session for all of us, so it's really interesting to know. Thank you if you voted. So let's move on. So when should we use AI written code, and when should we use human written code? It depends, is the trick. It depends. Never. Yeah. And that's kind of why I wanted to speak about this, because I do see a lot of, at the moment, there's a lot of people sitting on both, you know, one side of the fence, and they're very vocal. Oh, we should never use AI code. Oh, we should always use. By AI, I mean LLM AI coding agents like Claude. You know, I'll just use AI because I can't be bothered to use that phrase constantly. Things like Claude Code, Cursor, JetBrains, Junie, that kind of thing that's writing code for you from prompts. So, I mean, I do see it in the community at the moment. So many people are either fully pro AI, we should be using it all the time, it's a great time saver, you know, it's great, it's fine. And a lot of people saying, oh, we should never be using AI coding agents. We should write all of our code by hand. And I feel like the answer is somewhere on that slider in the middle for me. So, like everything, AI coding agents are a tool. I don't think yet they're meant to replace us as software engineers sitting in this room, because I think you get much better results if you are a software engineer using this tool than you do if you're not a software engineer using this tool. But it's a tool. I remember writing my first websites in Notepad++, my first HTML website. Big shout out to Notepad++ users. And then all of a sudden, like, people started using tools like Front Page and Dreamweaver to create good looking websites. And there was the same uproar. Oh, you should be writing every single HTML element by hand. You know, you shouldn't be using tools to do this for you. And I do feel like it's a similar approach where maybe some people feel threatened and then are on the side of, oh, we should never be using these tools. And other people like me are lazy and say, oh, we should use them as much as we can. Like, I'm working on a website at the moment, which is, I've only been working on it for a few months. I hazard to think how I used to learn how applications worked without having AI to help me find code particularly. That's kind of what I tend to do a lot on a day-to-day basis. Tell me where the code is that is executing to do this, and it gets me right to the file and the method, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's super helpful. Plus I can make a cup of tea while the AI is doing my work, right? That's also a good thing. I don't currently use any, I use Claude Code, it's my agent of choice. I don't use Claude to write any code that goes to the production for my clients at the moment, mainly because I'm nervous about being able to explain the decisions I made to my client if they should so ask me. And it would be highly embarrassing if my client was to say, oh, why did you do it like this? And then I go, I didn't, I just let a computer make that decision for me. Kind of wouldn't work in my day-to-day job. So at the moment, I tend to use it more as a navigational tool, but I've used it to write this entire presentation framework, and it worked perfectly well. Yeah, I am a little nervous. Who knows? Who knows what this could be the start of, right? It is what it is. We're living this dream. I'm hoping it'll be less kind of Skynet and more, you know, Marvin the paranoid android when it actually happens, but it is what it is. This was a really interesting one for me to look at, to see how many people, is 33%, you know, it's not an insignificant amount, are pro using AI in our daily jobs. I think that's fair. And I also think the 67% is fair. It depends, right? Yeah. Just in case, I want to get it on record. All hail our robotic overlords, so I'm fine. I'm fine. This will get indexed by some kind of AI agent somewhere, right? It is what it is. It's on YouTube.
Was the voting thing AI?
Was the voting thing an AI? Dave asked. Yes. Again, the voting was written by Claude in Laravel and using React. The slides are Reveal.js, and Claude Code wrote the extensions for Reveal.js to allow me to put the polls in as single slides and to put the thing. Did a great job. I'm okay with that because this isn't something that's going to be living on for a decade, making me money out in the wild where, you know, taking credit card payments, doing all that hard stuff. This is just a throwaway tool that I'm using to give a presentation. So the risk is low and the reward is high. Yeah, we'll move on. Some people are pre-voting, which I kind of like. I can see already that, you know, I'm okay with that. You've made your decisions without me even speaking about the topic. So I can just sit down now. It's fine. So should we write our own code or use an open source library? Some of these feel like no-brainers, right? We shouldn't reinvent the wheel. We should try and use and leverage open source code as much as we can. So we're talking about rolling your own versus using an open source library. And in PHP land, we're talking about Composer, right? So we're talking about pulling in dependencies through Composer and using those dependencies. I need to generate a UUID. Am I going to write my own implementation, or am I going to pull down Ram's UUID? Or I think Symfony have one now as well. So when should we be pulling things down from other people's open source code, and when should we be rolling our own? Composer is amazing. I know that there is somebody in the room who works for Composer, so thank you. Geordie and Neil's put phpclasses.org out of business kind of overnight, which is a good unintended side effect, I think. But yeah, I know that I'm totally guilty of this, right? Oh, I need to pull in a library. I'll just Google PHP UUID library, find the first one and compose require and it's in and it works and it's great, without really thinking about whether I should be doing that. Because there's a lot of trust involved in pulling in third-party code into your code base that we kind of don't acknowledge often enough, I think. I know I don't anyway. You know, do we kind of go to the GitHub page? Do we look how many open issues are there? When was the last commit? How many stars has it got? How many installs has it got? Or do we kind of just require it and trust that it's going to be a decent piece of software that we can use day to day? I probably do not. This is probably the one thing on this slide that I'm guilty of doing way too much myself. Just, I'll just pull that in and we'll be fine. Let's go. And that's kind of dangerous. So there's the trustworthiness of the software you're using. Like, what happens if the maintainer goes away? Are we willing to take on the burden of supporting this entire code base? Maybe we're only using 1% of it. Maybe we're only using like one class to do something in our code base, and it's a huge multi-purpose library. Are we willing to take on the burden of maintaining that entire thing if the maintainer goes away? Maybe, you know, as a serious bug, and now the maintainer's gone, and we have to apply a patch to that bug and any further bugs that come down the line forever if the maintainer goes away. Or maybe the whole package goes away. What are we going to do then? Like in 2016, a programmer, Azir, took down the leftpad package that he'd been maintaining for years. Leftpad is just a really simple string manipulation package that we have in core of PHP, but JavaScript didn't at the time. And he had an argument with NPM because they relinquished his namespace. Let's call it a namespace. They relinquished his namespace to a commercial company that he'd had for years, and in response, he just took down all of his packages. But nearly all of the packages in NPM had a dependency on leftpad, or they had a dependency on a dependency that had a dependency on leftpad. Too many dependencies. And so there was absolute chaos where everybody's NPM updates were failing because of this tiny package had gone. I don't think that is likely to happen in PHP. There are contingencies for that. But it's worth thinking about, right? Maybe we should be more considerate rather than just randomly pulling in code off the internet into our, you know, multi-million-pound business that takes credit card payments. Maybe we should be a little more considerate. 88% of people, you would use a library. I agree. Rolling your own is also like super viable and relevant here, especially if it's a small problem that you're solving. You know, maybe you don't want to pull in a massive library for a tiny problem that you're solving. So this is kind of a weird one, but it kind of fits in. I've spoken to a lot of people even last night and this morning about this. So when should we migrate away from a legacy code base? It's an interesting question because the term legacy has such emotionally charged reactions in the community. So yeah, what we're talking about here is, would you rather work on features for a legacy system, or would you rather work on rewriting a legacy system? That's the flip here. So yeah, even if I put just like legacy code on the slide, I can see some people's reactions. Anyone here would anyone here consider themselves to be working on a legacy code base?
Does PHP itself count?
Does PHP itself count? Yeah. Okay, so keep your hands up if that code base is over 5 years old. Over 10 years old? Over 15 years old? Anyone over 20 years old? Here's the hardcore people in the room. You PHP developers don't count. That's not a thing. So yeah, there's a handful of people in the room who are working on code bases that are like 20 years old, and I bet that makes a few people really, you know, cringe. Because legacy code is difficult code to work on, make no bones about it. We are fixing the problems of past developers, and we're fixing the mistakes the past developers made in good faith under constraints and conditions that we have no idea about. So it's easy to be judgmental when we're looking at legacy code, but code bases that have been in production for 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, they're making money. They're obviously doing something really, really well for them to still be around. They're a problem of their own success. And so I actually really, really enjoy working on legacy code bases. I don't know if that makes me weird. I'm guessing it may, but it's always a difficult decision to make, right? When do we move away from our legacy code base and start spending time on a rewrite? The customer I'm working for at the moment, stuck on PHP 7.1. It's a Zen Framework 1 application, if anyone remembers Zen Framework 1. I love Zen Framework 1. It's a pleasure to go back and work on Zen Framework 1, but we're stuck on PHP 7.1. Who laughed? I genuinely do. Like, I was a contributor at that project. So yeah, they took a very analytical approach. They're stuck on PHP 7.1, so there's security considerations, right? That's number one. Stuck on a version of PHP that is no longer supported and hasn't been supported for a number of years. So there's that. But the way they looked at it, they're an extremely high traffic auction site. And I'm not going to tell you the name, because then you may go and find the Zen Framework 1 PHP 7.1 vulnerabilities, and you know, it's all good. But they took a very analytical approach. They are incredibly high traffic. They saw a genuine decrease in servers needed when they moved from 5.6 to 7.1. And they've worked out that in 6 months they'll make the money back if they move to 8.4 because of the performance gains they'll receive. So this isn't even about security or all the other good things. This is a purely analytical, monetary reason for them to want to migrate. And then there, of course, are the anecdotal reasons: developer experience, being able to use the new version, the new features of PHP that we all love. But that's kind of the way that they did it, was to think, when the time is right is when the monetary gain will mean that it's a no-brainer. And that's kind of a reasonable way to look at it. That surprises me. 55% of people would prefer to be working on legacy. Depends what the term legacy is. It probably means something different to everybody in the room. But yeah, that is interesting. So, I didn't know Derek was going to be in the room, but when should we use var dump and when should I install a step debugger? This, for me, is the one where maybe there isn't a slider. Maybe I would always, particularly working on a legacy code base, I would always install a step debugger because... 41 people in the room. Wow, you're all good. Yeah, I would always install a step debugger. Like, I can't do my job without trying to figure out the flow of how code is and what's executing, working on a lot of legacy. You're still going, we're good. We're good. Like, this is perfectly, when I say I would always install a step debugger, I would also use var dump. Like, I'm not always step debugging every single time I want to do any debugging. Derek's just like looking at me with anger in his eyes. But I'll do this, you know. var dump has its place, but as soon as I've spent more than a couple of seconds trying to debug something, I just turn to xdebug. So if you haven't used step debugging tools before, and you want more information, come find me and I'll show you to Derek, and he can tell you how to install and use it. Derek's the creator and maintainer of xdebug. So yeah, this is just like super, super useful in your day-to-day job. And I just think that as a community, we're guilty of not leveraging this tool as widely as we should. Like, I'm not gonna judge anybody. Like, you do you, and particularly if you're working on a brand new Laravel app, the usefulness may be a lot more limited than it is for me working on a 15-year-old Zen Framework 1 app. You know, I need to be able to step in and see the state at these points of execution. And so I find it incredibly useful, and the pros are obvious. You can get massively more detailed information. The cons are it can be more difficult to set up, to install and configure and set up, particularly if you're using an atypical development environment. Can be challenging, but it's just got easier and easier, and you know it shouldn't be a big problem. If you're trying to use Xdebug and you're struggling, jump on the Rove Discord, and I'll give you a hand. That's an open invitation. It's the same problems we see over and over again, and the power you'll get out of it is so good. 49% of people in the room disagree with me, but that's fine. That's fine. We're nearly done. Lucky number 7. When should I put my morals to one side and just think about the money? It's a really interesting thing because of the job that we do as software engineers. We can pretty much be working for all spectrums of society, right? Everyone's got a website and everyone needs an application, and we could be working for the greatest charities in the world, or we could be working for, you know, gun manufacturers or mortgage providers or other kinds of evil companies. So estate agents, yeah, I've done work for estate agents, it's fine. So the question is, like, when should, you know, let's have a conversation about when we should be able to think about ourselves, really, and our own welfare over the principles of the company that we're working for. I've always said, like, I would never work for an evil company. I've always said it. I've said it out loud. There are certain companies that I would just never work for. But I don't think I'm kind of telling the truth there. Because really what I'm saying is there are certain companies that I would never work for in the parameters of what they would be willing to pay me. Like, would I work for a company who I am morally against if they offered me £10 million for a month's work? Like, change my life and I only have to do a month's work, and I probably would. You know, I'm not going to come up here and say I'm a perfect angel. I'm not. I probably would do that because it would change my life and the life of my kids forever, and I'm only doing for 1 month. Plus, I really would like to have a pit of money I can dive in and swim around, right? It is what it is. But I think the way that I try to make decisions to work for companies who morally do the right thing more often than not. I don't think there are perfect companies. I work for Twilio, who are a fantastic company, a very people-centric company. They kept saying it over and over again until they laid off 1,000 people one day. So, you know, they weren't perfect. And I thoroughly enjoyed working there. And so it's kind of important to be thinking about these things, I think. There's, 33 honest people in the room, which I like to see. I love to see it. So yeah, that's kind of what I have for you today. I'm hoping that we can think more about decisions that maybe we're guilty of not thinking about day to day. And hopefully think about what we are trading off when we make these decisions. So I'm hoping that you'll take away from this. I hope you have a fantastic conference. There's some amazing speakers in the room speaking today, so I hope you learn absolutely tons. I'll be hanging around all day if you've got any questions or if you want to just hang out. That's all good. And you can find me in the Rove Discord if you just want to come out. There's some really smart people in there who can answer questions if you ever need help on anything. I'd highly recommend it. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.